61 years old, when my son, Ethan, abandoned me. It wasn't a gradual goodbye, not a farewell with fake hugs and empty promises. It was a door slammed in my face, and a sentence that still burns my throat every time I remember it. You're not my problem anymore, Mom. 10 years. 10 years of absolute silence. 10 years in which my phone never rang with his voice. 10 years in which every birthday, every Christmas, every sleepless morning, I waited for a knock on my door. But Ethan never came back, until my husband, Arthur, died. Then, he showed up. Not with flowers, not with tears, not with regret. He showed up with a lawyer, with a lawsuit, and with a demand that broke what was left of my heart. I want half the inheritance. You're old. What do you need so much money for? I looked him in the eyes that day in the courthouse and barely recognized him. The boy I had held in my arms, the teenager whose college I paid for by selling everything, even my gold earrings, the man who swore he'd take care of me when Arthur was gone, had become a stranger. A predator dressed as a son. But what Ethan didn't know was that I had saved every paper, every message, every receipt, and that Judge Wallace was going to hear the whole truth. The truth my son wanted to bury under lies and manipulation. The truth that was going to destroy him. It all began on an October afternoon. I had just turned 61 and had just buried Arthur after 6 months of agony. Heart failure. I took care of him alone until his last breath, because Ethan never answered my calls. Not one. I left him 27 messages in those 6 months. 27 pleas from a mother begging her son to come say goodbye to his stepfather. The man who raised him as if he were his own blood. The man who paid for his private school, his car, his first apartment. Arthur died whispering Ethan's name. He died waiting for him. And Ethan didn't come. He arrived 3 days after the funeral, when everything was signed, sealed, and filed. He arrived with Chloe, his wife, a woman with a fake smile and perfect nails, who looked at me as if I were trash. "Mom," Ethan said at the door of the house, "Arthur and I built with 40 years of work. I'm here for what's mine." He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask if I had cried. He didn't ask if I needed help with the paperwork. He just held out his hand like a creditor collecting a debt. I slammed the door in his face. I heard Chloe scream from the other side. "Ungrateful old hag. We gave the best years of our lives to this family. The best years." I wanted to laugh, but I could only cry. I cried all that night, hugging Arthur's pillow that still smelled like him. I cried for my dead husband. I cried for the son I had lost long before that door slam, because Ethan didn't die that day. Ethan had died years before, the day he met Chloe. That woman poisoned him against me with such patience that I didn't even realize it until it was too late. It started with subtle comments. "Your mom is very controlling, don't you think? Why do you always have to ask her permission for everything? You're a man now, Ethan. It's time you set some boundaries." Boundaries. That word became a wall between us. A wall so high we could no longer see each other. Family dinners became awkward. Phone calls grew shorter. Visits disappeared. And when Arthur got sick, when I needed my son the most, Ethan was already gone. He had moved to the other side of the city with Chloe. They changed their number. They blocked me on social media. They erased me from their lives as if I were a mistake that needed to be corrected. I remember the last time I spoke to Ethan before the total abandonment. It was on the phone. I was at the hospital with Arthur, who had just had a severe heart attack. I begged him to come, even for just 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes so Arthur could see that his son still loved him. "I can't, Mom. I have work. Chloe and I have plans. Besides, you always exaggerate everything. Arthur will be fine." Arthur died 2 weeks later. And Ethan never came. Not to the hospital. Not to the wake. Not to the funeral. Nothing. I thought the pain of losing Arthur would be the worst thing that would ever happen to me. But I was wrong. The worst part was discovering that my son would only come back for money, that the 10 years of silence weren't out of shame or fear. They were out of contempt, out of forgetfulness, out of absolute indifference. Until Arthur died and left an inheritance. Then Ethan remembered he had a mother. Then Chloe remembered a mother-in-law existed. Then they both appeared in expensive suits and shark-like smiles, asking for what they never earned, what they never deserved. what they were never going to have. Because I, Eleanor, at 71 years old, still had fight in me. I still had dignity, and I still had the truth on my side. Before Ethan became the monster who demanded money over Arthur's grave, he was my little boy, my only son. The baby born when I was 23, and the whole world told me I couldn't make it alone. But I did. I always did. Ethan's father disappeared before he turned 2. He left one morning saying he was going to buy milk and never came back. Just like that. That cruel. He left me alone with a small child, a part-time job at a laundromat, and rent I couldn't afford. I worked triple shifts for years. I washed clothes by day, cleaned offices by night, and on weekends, I sold homemade pies on my street corner. Ethan grew up in that tiny room where a bed and a kitchenette barely fit, but he never lacked food. He never lacked clean clothes. He never lacked love. I met Arthur when Ethan was 7. Arthur was a mechanic, a good man with big hands and an enormous heart. He fell in love with me and my son as if we were a package deal, and to him we were. He never made a distinction. He never treated Ethan like a stepson. He legally adopted him when he was 9, and from that day on he was his dad, his real dad. Arthur and I worked side by side to give Ethan what we never had. We put him in the best school we could afford. We bought him books, uniforms, supplies. When he turned 15, Arthur gave him a new bicycle he had been saving for 8 months. Ethan cried with happiness that day. He hugged him and said, "You're the best dad in the world." I held that image in my heart like a treasure. I thought nothing could break that bond. I thought we had built an unbreakable family. How wrong I was. Ethan was a good son until he was 25. He graduated from college with honors. Arthur and I sold our car to pay for his final year. We didn't care. We took the bus with pride because our son was going to be an engineer. Our son was going to have a better future than ours. On his graduation day, Ethan went up to the stage, and when they asked who he dedicated his degree to, he pointed to where Arthur and I were sitting. "To my parents," he said with a broken voice, "for sacrificing everything so I could get here." I cried so much that day Arthur had to lend me his handkerchief. But everything changed when he met Chloe. She worked at the same company where Ethan got his first job. She was an HR coordinator. She was 6 years older than him and dressed as if she had money to spare. The first time I saw her, I knew something was wrong. The way she looked me up and down. The way her smile never reached her eyes. The way she said to Ethan, "Oh, honey, you didn't tell me your mom was so traditional." Traditional. That was her elegant way of saying poor, of saying old, of saying insignificant. And Ethan laughed. He laughed at the mockery his girlfriend had just made to my face. That hurt more than any punch. From that day on, Chloe began her work of separating us. First, it was the family dinners. "Oh, Ethan, your parents' house again? Wouldn't you rather we go to that new Italian restaurant?" Then it was the calls. "Your mom again? Can't she handle her own things? You're not a child anymore, sweetie." Ethan started to change. The visits became sparse. The calls turned cold. When I called, he'd answer in a hurry. "What's up, Mom? I'm busy." When we invited him for a meal, he always had plans. Chloe and I already have a commitment. When Arthur turned 60 and we threw a small party, Ethan arrived an hour late and left before the cake. Chloe was building a wall between us, brick by brick, and Ethan let her. Worse, he laid some of the bricks himself. He started complaining about absurd things. Why did I call him so much? Why did I expect him to visit every week? Why couldn't Arthur and I understand that he had his own life now? His own life, as if we were a burden. As if the 20-something years we dedicated to raising him were a load he needed to be free of. I tried to explain. "Ethan, honey, we don't want to take up your time. We just want to see you now and then. We just want to know you're okay." But he wasn't listening to me anymore. His ears only worked for Chloe. When Ethan announced he was getting married, he didn't even do it in person. He sent me a text message. "Mom, Chloe and I are getting married next month. The ceremony is intimate, just close family." Close family. Arthur and I weren't invited. His own mother wasn't invited to his wedding. I called Ethan, crying. "Why, son? What did I do wrong?" He sighed as if I were a bratty child. "Mom, don't make this harder. Chloe wants a small wedding. You two don't fit the vibe she's planning." We didn't fit. We were too poor. Too simple. Too embarrassing for the perfect family Chloe was building in her head. Arthur held me that night as I cried in the kitchen. "Let him go, Eleanor. He's a man now. He's made his decision." But I couldn't let him go. He was my son, my only son. The child I had birthed, raised, and loved with every cell in my body. I tried to reach out again after the wedding. I sent gifts. I sent messages. They ignored them. I tried to visit them at their new apartment. Chloe opened the door, looked at me with disgust, and said, "Ethan's not here. And next time, call before you come." She closed the door in my face as if I were an annoying salesperson. Months went by without seeing him. Then a year, then 2. And then Arthur got sick. The diagnosis landed like a bomb in January. Congestive heart failure. His heart was failing. The doctors told us he needed absolute rest, expensive medications, and constant care, that any crisis could be his last. Arthur took my hand in that cold office and told me, "Don't cry, my love. I'm going to fight, but I need you to call Ethan. I need to see him one more time." His voice broke when he said that. My strong man, my rock, was begging me to bring his son to him, the son who had forgotten him. I called him that same night. Once, twice, 5, 10 times, nothing. I sent messages, nothing. I wrote him long emails explaining everything. That his dad was very sick, that his heart was failing, that the doctors didn't know how much time he had left, that please, he should come, even for an hour. Nothing. He finally answered. 2 weeks after the diagnosis. A short, cold, soulless message. "Mom, I'm so sorry, but I can't come now. Chloe and I are really busy with work. I hope Dad Arthur gets better." Sending good vibes. Good vibes. As if a sick heart could be cured with good thoughts. As if his father wasn't slowly dying. I replied with trembling hands. "Ethan, your dad needs you. Just come once. Just so he can see you. Please." The message was left on read. He never replied. He blocked my number 2 days later. I knew because when I called again, the line went straight to voicemail. My own son blocked me while his father was dying. Arthur asked about him every week. "Has Ethan called? Is he coming soon?" I lied to him. I told him Ethan was on a business trip, that he would be here soon, that he sent his regards. White lies, so Arthur wouldn't die with a broken heart. So he wouldn't know that the son he raised as his own had completely abandoned him. The months passed, slow and cruel. Arthur deteriorated before my eyes. His breathing became difficult. His lips turned purple when he walked. His legs swelled up like balloons. He stopped climbing stairs. He stopped going outside. He stopped being the active man who fixed cars and danced with me in the kitchen on Sundays. I took care of him alone. Every pill at the exact time. Every doctor's appointment. Every night awake. Listening to his irregular breathing. Praying it wouldn't stop. Every morning rushing to the hospital when he had a crisis. All alone. Without help. Without my son. I spent all our savings on treatments. The heart medications cost $800 a month. The appointments with the cardiologist, $300 each. The tests, the MRIs, the EKGs, thousands and thousands of dollars that evaporated like water in the desert. I sold my wedding ring for $500. I sold the earrings Arthur gave me for our anniversary for $200. I sold everything of value. I didn't care. The only thing that mattered was that Arthur had his medicine, that he didn't suffer more than necessary. My neighbor Brenda helped when she could. She brought food. She sat with Arthur so I could sleep for an hour. She hugged me when I cried in the hallway. "You should call Ethan again," she'd tell me. "He needs to know how serious this is." But I had already called 27 times. I had already begged 27 times. I wasn't going to humiliate myself anymore. In his last month, Arthur could barely walk from the bedroom to the bathroom. His face was pale, his hands trembled, his voice came out in whispers. But one afternoon, while I was giving him his medicine, he took my hand with the little strength he had left. "Eleanor, promise me something." I moved closer, wiping away the tears I couldn't hold back. Anything, my love. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, as if each word cost him a piece of his life. Don't let Ethan hurt you when I'm gone. That boy is lost. He's not the child we raised. Promise me you'll take care of yourself, that you'll be strong. His voice broke. Promise me you won't give him anything he hasn't earned. Do you hear me? Nothing. I promise, I said, sobbing. I kissed his cold forehead. Nothing, my love. I swear. Arthur smiled faintly, as if that oath lifted a huge weight from him. You're the strongest woman I know. You'll be fine without me. But I didn't want to be without him. I didn't want a world where Arthur didn't exist. He died 3 days later. A Tuesday before dawn. I was asleep in the chair next to his bed when something woke me up. A strange silence. I opened my eyes and saw his chest was no longer rising and falling. I ran to him. I took his hand. Arthur? My love? Nothing. His eyes were closed, his mouth slightly open, his hand still warm but motionless. He had gone while I slept. He left in silence, without a goodbye, without a final word. I screamed. I screamed his name until my voice was raw. Brenda heard from her house and came running. She found me clinging to Arthur's body, rocking him as if he were a baby, begging him to wake up. Don't leave me, please. Don't leave me alone. But he was already gone. My Arthur was gone forever. I organized the funeral alone. I chose the most dignified casket I could afford, a dark wood, one with silver handles. I arranged the service at the neighborhood funeral home. I had the obituaries made with a picture of Arthur smiling from when he was still healthy. I notified our friends, our neighbors, the few relatives we had. And for the last time, for the last damn time, I tried to contact Ethan. I searched for his number in old papers. I found one he hadn't blocked, his work number. I called, and a receptionist put me through to him. Hello? He answered impatiently. Ethan, I said, my voice trembling. It's your mom. Your dad passed away. The funeral is on Thursday at 10 in the morning. I need you to come. Silence. A long, heavy silence. Ethan? Did you hear me? Yes, Mom. I heard you. His voice was flat, emotionless. I'll see if I can make it. I have an important meeting that day, but I'll try. A meeting. His father had just died, and he had an important meeting. Ethan, please. It's your dad's funeral. The man who raised you. The man who loved you as if you were his own blood. He sighed, annoyed. I already told you I'll try, Mom. I have to go. And he hung up, just like that. Without a, I'm sorry. Without a my condolences. Nothing. Thursday came. The funeral home was filled with people who loved Arthur. Co-workers from the mechanic shop where he worked for 30 years. Neighbors who had known him their whole lives. Childhood friends. Brenda and her entire family. Everyone but Ethan. I sat in the front row, in a black dress that was too big for me because I had lost 20 pounds in the last few months. I stared at the closed casket and waited. I waited to hear the door open. I waited to see my son walk in. The priest began the service. He spoke of Arthur as a hard-working, honest, loving man. He read psalms. He prayed. People cried. I cried. But Ethan didn't arrive. Half an hour passed. An hour passed. They closed the casket. We took him to the cemetery in a slow procession. They lowered him into the earth. They threw the first shovelfuls of dirt. And Ethan never appeared. My son did not come to the burial of the man who raised him. I returned to an empty house that night. The house smelled of medicine and death. Arthur's pills were still on the nightstand. His clothes still hung in the closet. His shoes were still by the door. Everything was there, except him. I sat on our bed, the bed where we slept in each other's arms for 40 years, and cried until I had no tears left. I cried for my dead husband. I cried for the son I lost years ago. I cried for the 71-year-old woman who was completely alone in the world. But on Friday, 3 days after the burial, someone knocked on my door. 3 sharp, impatient knocks. I opened it with swollen eyes, my hair uncombed, wearing the same wrinkled black dress I hadn't taken off. And there he was, Ethan, in a gray suit that looked fresh from the dry cleaner, with shiny shoes, with a watch on his wrist that cost more than his father's entire funeral. And beside him, Chloe, with designer sunglasses, with a purse I recognized from an expensive store window, with a small, cruel smile that froze my blood. "Hello, Mom," Ethan said, as if nothing had happened, as if 10 years hadn't passed, as if his father hadn't just died, as if I hadn't been waiting for him for a whole decade. "Sorry I didn't make it to the funeral. Traffic was impossible." Traffic. That was his excuse. The damn traffic. As if he hadn't had 3 days' notice. As if he couldn't have taken a taxi, an Uber, or walked. Traffic. I didn't hug him. I didn't cry with relief. I felt nothing but a deep cold in my chest. I stood in the doorway, looking at him the way you look at an annoying salesperson, a dangerous stranger, someone you don't know and don't want to know. "What do you want, Ethan?" My voice sounded harsher than I intended. He blinked in surprise, as if my coldness were unjustified, as if he were the victim here. Chloe took off her sunglasses and looked at me with those calculating, stone-cold eyes. "Eleanor, we've come to talk about Arthur's inheritance. We understand he left property and savings. Ethan is entitled to his share as his son." As his son. The word sounded obscene coming from her mouth. I felt something explode inside me. Something that had been contained for 10 years of silence, 6 months of agony, 3 days of mourning, a rage so great it surprised me. "His share?" I repeated with a dangerous calm. "His share of what, exactly?" Ethan took a step forward, trying to intimidate me with his height. "Mom, don't play dumb. Dad Arthur had this house. He had savings. He had the shop. I'm his son. By law, I'm entitled to half. By law, not by love, not for having cared for him, not for having been there. By law." "You weren't there," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "You weren't there when he was diagnosed with heart failure. You weren't there for any of his crises. You weren't there when I sold my jewelry to buy his medicine. You weren't there when he died. You weren't at his funeral. You are not his son, Ethan. You stopped being his son 10 years ago." Chloe let out a bitter little laugh, the kind a snake makes before it bites. "Oh, please, so dramatic. Ethan has been busy building his career, his life. He can't come running every time you call him crying. He's an adult. He has responsibilities. Responsibilities. As if I had been a burden. As if asking him to visit his dying father was an exaggeration. "Get out of my house," I said, pointing to the street. "You have no business here." Ethan clenched his jaw. I saw a flash of something in his eyes. Rage? Shame? I don't know, and I no longer cared. "Mom, don't be ridiculous. This isn't over. I have rights." "You have nothing," I screamed. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Arthur left everything to me because I was there, because I took care of him, because I loved him until his last breath while you were busy with your meetings and your piece of trash, wife." Chloe gasped, offended. Ethan looked at me with a hatred I had never seen in him. "Fine, Mom," he said in a frigid voice. "If you want to do it this way, we'll do it this way. See you in court. And I'm warning you, I will fight for every cent that's mine. Every last cent." I slammed the door in his face so hard the windows rattled. I heard Chloe screaming from the other side. "Selfish old woman. You're going to regret this. We'll leave you on the street." I heard their footsteps retreating, the engine of an expensive car starting, the tires screeching, and then silence. A heavy silence that crushed my chest. I sank against the door and took a deep breath. Arthur was right. Ethan was lost. But I was still here, and I wasn't going to let them destroy me. 2 weeks later, the lawsuit arrived. A yellow envelope that the courier handed me with a pitying look, as if he knew those pages brought misfortune. I opened it with trembling hands. "Petition for division of assets and lawful heir," the heading read. I read the whole thing in disbelief. Ethan was suing me for half of everything. The house. The savings. Arthur's shop that we had closed when he could no longer work. Everything. But the worst part wasn't the numbers or the amounts. The worst part was the narrative Ethan had constructed. In those papers, I was the villain. The controlling mother who pushed the son away from the father, the manipulative wife who kept everything for herself. The selfish old woman who denied her son what was rightfully his. Every line was a lie. Every paragraph was a stab in the back. I called Brenda, crying. She came right over, read the lawsuit, and clenched her fists. "This is garbage, Eleanor. Pure lies. How can he say you kept him away from Arthur? He's the one who disappeared. I witnessed how he abandoned you both." She was right. Brenda had seen it all. She had seen my desperate calls. She had seen Arthur asking for Ethan until his last day. She had seen the sunless funeral. "You need a lawyer," Brenda said firmly. "And you need proof, everything you have, messages, receipts, whatever." I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up going through old shoeboxes where I kept papers. I found the receipts for Arthur's medications, all in my name. Thousands of dollars in treatments that I paid for alone. I found the funeral programs. I found the visitor log where Ethan never signed. I found something more important. My old phone. The one I had stopped using 2 years ago but never threw away. I charged it with nervous hands and checked the messages. There they were. The 27 messages I sent to Ethan, begging him to come see Arthur. Unanswered messages. Messages left on read. Messages that proved everything. Every plea. Every "please, son." Every "your dad needs you." All ignored. I also found something that broke my heart all over again. A short video I had accidentally recorded. It was from 3 months before Arthur died. I was filming the flowers in the garden, and the camera caught Arthur sitting in his chair, looking at the phone. "Did you call Ethan?" he asked in a weak voice. "Yes, my love. He must be busy. He'll call you later," I lied. Arthur nodded, and a tear rolled down his cheek. "He's not coming anymore, is he?" I didn't answer. The video ended there. I cried watching that clip. I cried for Arthur, who died waiting for a son who never came. I cried for myself, for having to lie to him so he wouldn't suffer more. I cried with rage that Ethan dared to sue me after everything. But I also felt something else. Determination. That video was my weapon. That truth was my shield. I hired a lawyer with the little money I had left. His name was Patrick, a 50-year-old man with a kind face but sharp eyes. I showed him everything. The receipts, the messages, the video, the unanswered calls, the funeral log, everything. Patrick read every paper carefully. He watched the video 3 times. When he finished, he took off his glasses and looked at me with something like admiration. "Mrs. Miller, this is gold. This completely destroys his case." I nodded, but I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. "How long will this take?" I asked. "A few months, maybe 4 or 5. But I promise you, we are going to win. Ethan has nothing, only lies. And lies don't stand up to the truth." Meanwhile, Ethan and Chloe didn't stay quiet. They started a smear campaign. Chloe created posts on social media about the toxic mother-in-law who had stolen her husband's inheritance. She didn't use my name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. She posted old pictures of a young Ethan with Arthur and wrote things like, "A loving son kept from his father by a manipulative mother. Justice for Ethan." The comments were poison. People who didn't know me insulted me. They called me selfish, a bitter old woman, a thief. Some even said they should take everything from me and leave me on the street. Brenda defended me in every post, but there were too many. A lie travels faster than the truth. Ethan also called the few relatives we had, distant uncles, cousins we hadn't seen in years. He told them his version, that I had pushed him away from Arthur, that I never told him his father was seriously ill, that I kicked him out of the funeral. Lies upon lies. Some believed him. They called me to complain, to tell me I was a disgrace. How dare I deny my own son his inheritance? I stopped answering the phone. I stopped leaving the house. Every time I went to the supermarket, I felt the stares, the whispers. The people in the neighborhood had heard the gossip. Some supported me. Others judged me without knowing anything. The world had become hostile. But I stood firm. I had the truth. And the truth was going to come out. The months dragged on. Every day was a battle against anxiety, against fear, against loneliness. I lived alone in that house full of ghosts. The ghost of Arthur in every corner, his coffee mug still in the sink, his jacket hanging on the coat rack, his scent fading little by little until I couldn't remember it clearly anymore. And the ghost of Ethan, the boy he was, the son I lost. Brenda came over every day. She brought me food because I had stopped cooking. She forced me to go out into the garden, to get some sun, to not die while I was still living. You have to take care of yourself, Eleanor. Arthur wouldn't want to see you like this. But Arthur wasn't here. And his absence was a black hole swallowing me whole. Patrick called me every week with updates. Ethan's lawyer is asking for extensions. They're delaying everything they can. It was a strategy. To wear me down. To make me believe it wasn't worth fighting. That it was easier to give up and give him half. But I wasn't going to give up. I had promised Arthur I wouldn't give them anything, and promises made to the dead are sacred. Ethan intensified his attacks. He started showing up at my house unannounced. He would knock on the door at 7 in the morning. At 10 at night, he would shout from the street, "Mom, open up! We need to talk." The neighbors would come out to see the spectacle. I stayed inside, with the curtains closed, my heart pounding in my chest. Brenda would call the police. "We can't do anything," the officers would tell me. "He's not threatening her directly, he's just knocking on the door." One night, Ethan came drunk. I knew from his slurred voice, dragging his words. "Mom, come out, damn it. You're selfish, a bad mother. It's your fault Chloe is going to leave me. I need that money." There it was, the truth. It wasn't about love for Arthur. It wasn't about memories. It was about money, about need, about greed. Chloe had threatened to divorce him if he didn't get the inheritance. I found out later from a distant cousin who told me out of pity. Ethan had been spending more than he earned trying to keep up with the lifestyle Chloe demanded. Expensive cars, restaurants, trips, designer clothes. They were in debt up to their eyeballs, and Arthur's inheritance was their lifeline. That's why they were fighting so hard. Not for love, for desperation. Finally, the date for the preliminary hearing arrived. It was a Tuesday in July. The heat was hellish. I dressed in my best clothes, a gray suit I had worn to Arthur's funeral. Brenda came with me. Patrick was waiting for me on the courthouse steps with a briefcase full of evidence. "Stay calm, Mrs. Miller. Today we're just presenting initial arguments. The real trial will be in 2 months." We entered the courtroom. It was small, cold, with cream-colored walls and the smell of old paper. Ethan was already there, sitting at the other table with his lawyer, a thin man in a black suit with a shark's expression. Chloe was behind him, in the public benches, wearing dark sunglasses and a martyr's face. When I walked in, Ethan looked at me. Just for a second. And in that second, I saw something that broke me. Guilt, fear, but also stubbornness, wounded pride. The judge entered. He was an older man, about 60, with completely white hair and a stern expression. He introduced himself as Judge Wallace. He sat down, reviewed some papers, and looked at both of us. "All right, we are here for a petition for division of inheritance. Mr. Ethan Miller versus Mrs. Eleanor Miller. Counsel, are you ready?" Both lawyers nodded. Ethan's lawyer spoke first. His voice was smooth, manipulative, perfectly rehearsed. "Your Honor, my client is the only son of the deceased, Arthur Miller. He was raised by him since the age of 9. He has legal adoption papers. Therefore, he has a legitimate right to half of the decedent's assets. However, Mrs. Eleanor Miller refuses to recognize this right and has kept all the assets under her name." Patrick stood up calmly. "Your Honor, what opposing counsel fails to mention is that Mr. Ethan Miller abandoned his father for the last 10 years of his life. He was not present during his illness. He did not attend his funeral. He did not contribute financially to any of his medical expenses. Mrs. Miller is the only one who cared for, supported, and accompanied Mr. Arthur Miller until his death." Ethan's lawyer smiled smugly. "That is an emotional narrative, Your Honor. It has no legal relevance. The right to inherit is not lost due to a lack of contact. My client had his personal reasons for distancing himself, many of them caused by Mrs. Miller's controlling attitude. I felt the rage rise in my throat. Controlling. Another lie. Patrick raised his hand. asking to speak. Your Honor, we have conclusive proof that Mr. Ethan Miller not only distanced himself, but deliberately ignored his mother's pleas for him to visit his dying father. We have 27 unanswered messages. We have evidence that he blocked his mother's number. We have testimony from neighbors. Judge Wallace raised his eyebrows with interest. 27 messages, you say? Patrick nodded. Yes, Your Honor. All of them begging him to come see his father. All of them ignored. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His lawyer whispered something in his ear. Chloe crossed her arms with an angry look. Very well, the judge said. This clearly requires a full hearing with the presentation of evidence. I am scheduling this for September 20th at 10 in the morning. Both parties are to bring all relevant documentation. Witnesses, if any. And I warn you both. This is a court of law, not a theater. I want facts, not family drama. He banged the gavel. Court is adjourned. We left the courtroom. Brenda hugged me. You did well. You were strong. But I didn't feel strong. I felt exhausted, shattered. I saw Ethan leave with Chloe. She was yelling at him in a low voice, but I managed to hear, 27 messages, Ethan? You told me she never reached out, and it turns out she sent you 27 messages. Ethan didn't answer. He walked quickly toward the parking lot, his head down, like a scolded child. The next 2 months were a period of intense preparation. Patrick meticulously organized all the evidence. He printed every message, every receipt, every photo. He prepared a complete timeline showing Ethan's abandonment. He contacted Brenda to testify. He contacted the doctor who treated Arthur. He contacted the owner of the funeral home who could confirm that Ethan never showed up. I rehearsed my testimony every night. Patrick asked me difficult questions to prepare me. Why do you think your son abandoned you? Did you ever deny Ethan anything? Do you have proof that you sold your jewelry to pay for medicine? Every question was an open wound. But I had to be ready. I had to be strong. Brenda prepared as well. We went over what she was going to say together. I'm going to tell them everything, Eleanor. How I saw you suffer. How Arthur asked for Ethan. How you cried on the day of the funeral because your son didn't come. Her loyalty made me cry. In this cruel world, she was my only real ally. Ethan was also preparing. I knew because another social media campaign began. Chloe posted things like, "When justice is delayed, the heart suffers. Pray for Ethan in his fight against family injustice." They posted old photos of Ethan with Arthur. Ethan as a child on Arthur's shoulders. Teenager Ethan receiving his bicycle. Ethan at his graduation hugging Arthur. All real photos, all true memories, but used to build a lie. The comments were divided. Some supported Ethan. How sad that a mother would deny her son what is rightfully his. Others were starting to have doubts. But if the dad was sick, where was Ethan? The narrative was starting to crack. The truth was beginning to leak out. A week before the trial, Ethan tried something desperate. He came to my house at night, alone, without Chloe. He knocked softly. "Mom, it's me. Please open up. I need to talk to you." His voice sounded different, less aggressive, almost scared. I didn't open the door. I stayed on the other side, listening. "Mom, please. We can sort this out without a trial. Without lawyers. Just you and me. Like family. Family." That word from his mouth sounded obscene. "We have nothing to talk about, Ethan," I said from inside. "See you in court." I heard his heavy breathing. "Mom, I'm sorry." "Okay? I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry for everything. But I need that money. Chloe is going to leave me if I don't get something. I'm desperate." There it was. The truth. It wasn't remorse. It was panic. "You should have thought of that before," I said. My voice came out cold, emotionless. "Before you abandoned me. Before you ignored your dying father. Before you skipped his funeral. It's too late now, Ethan. Far too late." Silence. Then footsteps walking away. The sound of a car engine. And again, that crushing loneliness. September 20th arrived. I woke up at 5 in the morning, even though the hearing was at 10. I hadn't been able to sleep well in weeks. Every night I dreamed of Arthur, Sometimes he would ask me to forgive Ethan. Other times he would tell me to fight. I woke up confused, tired, but determined. This was the day the truth would finally come to light. I dressed carefully, the same gray suit, the same comfortable black shoes. I put on a little makeup so I wouldn't look so worn out. Brenda arrived at 8. "Ready?" she asked, taking my hand. "Ready," I lied. I would never be ready for this. To face my son in a courtroom, to air our family tragedy in front of strangers. But I had no choice. Patrick was waiting for us outside the courthouse. He was carrying 2 boxes full of documents. "It's going to be tough today, Mrs. Miller. Ethan's lawyer is going to try to make you look bad. He'll ask uncomfortable questions. But you just answer with the truth. The truth is all we need." I nodded, though my stomach was in knots. We entered the courtroom. This time there were more people. Some curious neighbors, distant cousins who had come to judge. Chloe, of course, in the front row, dressed in white as if she were an innocent victim. And Ethan, sitting at his table, in a black suit, red tie, his hands clasped together. When I walked in, he looked up. Our eyes met for a second. I saw fear there, but I also saw stubbornness. He wasn't going to give up. Judge Wallace entered promptly. We all stood. "Good morning. Please be seated." His voice was deep, authoritative. He reviewed some papers and looked at us. "All right. Today we will hear testimony and review evidence. I want this to be orderly and respectful. We will proceed as follows. First, the plaintiff will present his case, then the defendant. Understood?" Both lawyers nodded. Ethan's lawyer stood up with that professional smile that was already making me sick. "Your Honor, we call Mr. Ethan Miller to the stand." Ethan stood up, walked to the witness stand, and swore to tell the truth. He sat down and looked at his lawyer with a rehearsed expression of a long-suffering son. "Mr. Miller, can you tell us about your relationship with your father, Mr. Arthur Miller?" Ethan cleared his throat. "He was my dad since I was 9 years old. He legally adopted me. He raised me as if I were his biological son. He was a great man. I loved him very much." His voice cracked slightly. "A perfect performance. And what happened to that relationship in recent years?" Ethan sighed dramatically. "My mom. She was always very controlling. When I married Chloe, she started to get jealous. She would make hurtful comments about my wife. She created conflict at every family gathering. It got to a point where it was unbearable to be around her. It hurt me, but I had to distance myself for my own mental health. I felt my blood boil. Every word was a lie. Patrick placed his hand on mine, calming me. "Wait," he whispered. The lawyer continued. "And when did you find out your father was sick?" Ethan looked down, as if ashamed. "Too late. My mom never called to tell me he was seriously ill. I found out after he had already passed, through a cold, impersonal message. I didn't get a chance to say goodbye." The courtroom murmured. Some looked at him with compassion. I wanted to scream. I wanted to jump up and call him a liar. But Patrick squeezed my hand. "Soon," he whispered. The lawyer asked a few more questions, all designed to paint Ethan as the victim. Then he sat down, satisfied. Patrick stood up. He adjusted his glasses and looked at Ethan with an intensity that surprised me. "Mr. Miller, you say your mother never called to inform you that your father was seriously ill. Is that correct?" Ethan nodded. "That's right." Patrick pulled out a document. "Your Honor, I present as evidence the call log from Mrs. Miller's phone. Between January and June of last year, she made 27 calls to Mr. Miller's number." 27. Can you explain that?" Ethan turned pale. I don't remember receiving that many calls." Patrick smiled coldly. "We also have the text messages. Would you like me to read them aloud?" Ethan shook his head quickly. "No, maybe she did call a few times. But I was busy. I couldn't always answer." "Busy for 6 months? So busy that you couldn't answer a single time?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "I had work, responsibilities." Patrick raised his eyebrows. "More important than your dying father?" Ethan's lawyer stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. He's badgering the witness." The judge shook his head. Overruled. It's a valid question. Answer, Mr. Miller. Ethan swallowed hard. I didn't know he was that sick. Patrick pulled out another paper. Here is a message from your mother, dated March 15th. It reads, verbatim. Ethan, your dad is very sick. His heart is failing. The doctors don't know how much time he has left. Please come see him. Just once. I'm begging you. Did you respond to this message? Silence. Ethan was staring at his hands. No. Why not? Ethan looked up, his eyes glistening. Because I thought my mom was exaggerating. She always exaggerated things to get my attention. Patrick nodded slowly. I see. And what about the funeral? Did you also think she was exaggerating about your father's death? The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I was late. There was traffic. Patrick let out a bitter laugh. 3 days late, Mr. Miller. The funeral was on a Thursday. You arrived on Friday. How much traffic can there be? Ethan didn't answer. He just stared at the floor like a child caught in a lie. I have the funeral home's records here, Patrick continued. The list of attendees at the wake and the burial. Your name does not appear, not once. Your father, the man who raised you, adopted you, paid for your education, was buried without you being present. Does that seem normal to you? Ethan had tears in his eyes now. But I don't know if they were from shame or just part of the act. No further questions, Patrick said, and sat back down. Judge Wallace looked at Ethan with an expression I couldn't decipher. You may step down, Mr. Miller. Ethan got down from the stand, his legs trembling. Chloe glared at him from her seat, probably angry that his performance wasn't better. The defense may call its witness, the judge said. Patrick stood up. We call Mrs. Brenda Davis to the stand. My neighbor walked to the stand with firm steps. She swore to tell the truth and sat down, looking directly at the judge. Patrick asked her questions about what she had witnessed. Brenda told everything in a clear, emotional voice. I saw Eleanor suffer every day. I heard her cry every night. I saw her sell her belongings to pay for Arthur's medications. I saw her call Ethan over and over again without getting a response. I was there on the day of the funeral. There were 30 people. Neighbors, friends, co-workers, everyone but Ethan. I saw Eleanor looking at the door every 5 minutes, hoping her son would walk in. He never came. Her voice broke. Arthur asked me about Ethan 2 days before he died. He told me, Brenda, tell my son I forgive him, that I'm not angry. I just want to see him one more time. I told him I would give him the message. But I never could, because Ethan never answered his mother's calls. Arthur died waiting for him. He died with a broken heart. Ethan's lawyer tried to discredit Brenda. You're not part of the family, are you? How can you know what was happening in private? Brenda looked at him with contempt. I've been their neighbor for 20 years. I watched Ethan grow up. I saw how he changed when he met that woman. She pointed at Chloe. I saw how he stopped visiting, how he stopped calling, how he stopped caring. I don't need to be family to see abandonment. The judge called for order when the courtroom murmured. That's enough. Next witness. Patrick looked at me. We call Mrs. Eleanor Miller. My moment had come. I stood up, my legs shaking. I walked to the stand, feeling all eyes on me. I swore to tell the truth and sat down. I looked at Ethan. He was looking away, unable to meet my gaze. Patrick asked me simple questions at first. About how I met Arthur, how we raised Ethan, how we paid for his education. I answered in a calm voice, remembering every sacrifice with painful clarity. Then came the hard questions. When did you notice your relationship with Ethan changing? When he met Chloe, I answered, looking at the judge. She began to poison him against us. Small comments at first, then demands. Ethan started to distance himself. The visits became sporadic. The calls, cold. And when Arthur got sick, when we needed our son the most, he was already gone. Patrick nodded and took out his phone. Your Honor, with your permission, I would like to show a video that Mrs. Miller unintentionally recorded 3 months before Mr. Miller's death. Judge Wallace gestured his approval. Proceed. Patrick connected the phone to a screen. The courtroom darkened slightly, and there was Arthur. He looked so fragile in that chair, so thin, so sick. My voice could be heard from behind the camera, trying to sound cheerful as I filmed the flowers. And then the camera accidentally turned and captured Arthur looking at his phone with those sad, lost eyes. "Did you call Ethan?" he asked in a weak voice, almost a whisper. "Yes, my love. He must be busy." "He'll call you later," I lied, and the break in my own voice was audible. Arthur nodded slowly, as if he knew it was a lie but didn't want to admit it. "He's not coming anymore, is he?" The question hung in the air, heavy with pain. I didn't answer. My ragged breathing could be heard. The video ended with Arthur wiping away a tear with the back of his hand. The courtroom was in absolute silence, a silence so heavy it hurt to breathe. I looked at Ethan. His face was in his hands, his shoulders were shaking. He was crying. But I don't know if it was out of guilt or shame that everyone was watching his abandonment projected on that screen. Chloe had her lips pressed together, her gaze fixed on the floor, as if she wanted to disappear. Judge Wallace took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harsher, more personal. "Mrs. Miller, how much did you spend on your husband's care during those 6 months?" I pulled out the receipts I had memorized. "Approximately $32,000, Your Honor, between medications, consultations, tests, and hospitalizations." "And did Mr. Miller contribute anything?" I shook my head. "Nothing, Your Honor. Not 1 cent, not 1 visit, not 1 call." The judge wrote something on his papers. "And after his passing?" "When did Mr. Miller appear?" 3 days after the funeral. He came to demand his share of the inheritance. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask how his father had died. He only asked how much money there was." Patrick intervened. "Your Honor, we also have evidence that Mr. Miller and his wife are facing severe financial problems. Credit card debts, unpaid loans. Mrs. Miller even threatened her husband with divorce if he didn't get money from this inheritance." Ethan's lawyer stood up, outraged. "Objection! Where is this information coming from?" Patrick smiled. "From the same social media where Mrs. Miller's wife has been slandering my client. Posts that she later deleted, but which we captured. In one of them, she wrote to a friend, 'If Ethan doesn't get that money, I'm divorcing him. I didn't marry him to be poor.'" The judge asked to see the screenshots. He reviewed them in silence. His expression hardened even more. "Continue, counselor." Patrick turned back to me. "Mrs. Miller, after Mr. Miller sued you, did he try to contact you in any way?" I nodded. "Yes. He came to my house several times, sometimes shouting, sometimes drunk. One time he came alone, at night, saying he needed the money because Chloe was going to leave him. It wasn't remorse. It was desperation." Ethan's lawyer looked at me with hatred. "May I cross-examine the witness, Your Honor?" The judge nodded. "Proceed." The man approached me with that shark-like smile. "Mrs. Miller, is it true that you never approved of your son's marriage?" I looked him straight in the eye. "It's true. I did not approve of him marrying a woman who was only after his money and status." "Don't you think that kind of attitude might have pushed your son away?" I shook my head. What pushed my son away was his own cowardice, his inability to see that that woman was using him, and his decision to put money and appearances before his own family. The lawyer clenched his jaw. "Ma'am, don't you think it's selfish to keep the entire inheritance when your son also has a legal right to it?" I felt the rage climb up my throat. Selfish? Me? I spent every penny we had to keep Arthur alive. I sold my jewelry, my memories, my dignity begging for loans. I cared for him alone, without help, without rest, for 6 months. Where was Ethan? Where was his right as a son then? A right isn't just claimed when there's money. A right is earned with presence, with love, with sacrifice. Ethan has no right to anything because he was there for nothing. My voice had risen. I was trembling with rage. Patrick looked at me with pride. The judge raised his hand. "Calm down, ma'am. I understand your emotion, but let's maintain composure." I took a deep breath. "I apologize, Your Honor." Ethan's lawyer looked at me with contempt. "No further questions." He returned to his seat, defeated. Judge Wallace looked at his watch. We will take a 30-minute recess, after which I will hear the closing arguments. He banged the gavel. We all rose. I left the courtroom on weak legs. Brenda hugged me. You did perfectly. You told him everything. Patrick was smiling. That was excellent. The judge is on our side. I saw it in his eyes. Ethan came out with Chloe. She was whispering angrily to him, but I caught fragments. You're an idiot. That video destroyed us. Why didn't you tell me your mom called you so many times? Ethan didn't respond. He just walked like a zombie towards the restrooms. Chloe followed him, venomous. If we lose this, it's over, Ethan. Do you hear me? It's over. I went back inside after the recess. The judge called for closing arguments. Ethan's lawyer made one last pathetic attempt. He talked about laws, inheritance rights, that feelings couldn't negate what was written in the civil code. He sounded desperate. He sounded empty. No one in that room believed him anymore. Patrick stood up calmly. Your Honor, this case is not about laws. It's about justice. It's about a good man who worked his entire life, who adopted a child as his own, who loved him unconditionally, and who died waiting for him. It's about a woman who sacrificed everything to care for her husband. And it's about a son who only showed up when he smelled money. He paused. The law can say many things, but morality says more. And morally, Ethan Miller does not deserve a single cent. The judge nodded slowly. I will retire to deliberate. I will give you my verdict in 1 hour. He stood up and left through a side door. That hour was the longest of my life. I sat on the bench, with Brenda by my side, praying silently. Patrick nervously reviewed his papers. Ethan and Chloe were in the other corner, he with his head in his hands, she with her arms crossed and a furious expression. Finally, the judge returned. We all stood. Please be seated. His voice sounded tired. He sat down, put on his glasses, and looked at both of us. I have reviewed all the evidence. I have heard all the testimony. And I have reached a decision. My heart was beating so hard I thought everyone could hear it. In strictly legal terms, Mr. Ethan Miller has an inheritance, right as the adopted son of the decedent. Ethan lifted his head with hope. Chloe smiled. I felt the floor open up beneath me, but the judge raised his hand. However, that word floated in the air like salvation. However, there is also something called unworthy heir doctrine. This doctrine applies when an heir has committed serious acts against the decedent, and the deliberate abandonment of a sick and dying parent, ignoring repeated pleas for help, and not attending their funeral, constitutes, in my opinion, an act of moral unworthiness that justifies the forfeiture of the right to inherit. Ethan turned pale. Chloe stopped smiling. The judge continued, and his voice became harder, more personal. I have seen many cases in this courtroom. I have seen families fight over money. But rarely have I seen an abandonment so cruel, so calculated, so absolute as the one demonstrated here today. He looked directly at Ethan. Mr. Miller, you had a father who loved you, a mother who sacrificed everything for you, and you abandoned them out of cowardice and greed. Judge Wallace continued, and every word fell like a hammer on Ethan. You ignored 27 calls from your mother begging you to visit your dying father. 27 opportunities to do the right thing. 27 moments where you could have chosen to be a son instead of a coward. And you chose silence. You chose indifference. You chose abandonment. Ethan's head was bowed. His hands trembled on the table. Chloe looked at him with a mixture of horror and rage, as if she had just realized the kind of monster she had married. The judge wasn't finished. You did not attend the funeral of the man who raised you, the man who gave you his name, who paid for your education, who loved you as his own flesh and blood. That is not just a lack of respect, that is cruelty, that is unworthiness in its purest form. The courtroom was in absolute silence. No one moved, no one breathed. The judge looked at his papers and then looked up again. You showed up 3 days after the burial. Not to mourn, not to comfort your mother, not to honor your father's memory. You showed up to demand money, to claim an inheritance you didn't earn with love, but wanted to take by law. That is not being a son. That is being an opportunist. Patrick squeezed my hand discreetly. Brenda was crying silently beside me. I couldn't cry. I couldn't feel anything but a cold emptiness. The judge took a deep breath and spoke the words that would change everything. Therefore, I declare Ethan Miller unworthy to inherit the assets of Arthur Miller. The entirety of the estate is awarded to the rightful possession of Mrs. Eleanor Miller, as the widow and sole caregiver of the decedent. Furthermore, the judge continued in a severe voice, I order Mr. Ethan Miller to pay the legal costs for both parties for filing a frivolous lawsuit based on deceit and manipulation of the facts. I also order a temporary restraining order to be issued, preventing Mr. Miller and his wife from approaching Mrs. Miller's property for a period of 2 years. He banged the gavel. Court is adjourned. The sound echoed in the room like thunder. Ethan collapsed onto the table, sobbing. Letty jumped up with a choked cry. This is unfair. This is a damn injustice. The judge looked at her coldly. Ma'am, I suggest you leave before I hold you in contempt. And I recommend you choose your future partners more wisely. Preferably men with some dignity. Letty stormed out, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Ethan stood up, staggering, his face red and his eyes swollen. He looked at me one last time. In that look, there was defeat, shame, but also something like hatred, as if I were the one to blame for his misfortune, as if I had done something wrong. I couldn't meet his gaze. He wasn't my son anymore. He was a stranger who shared my blood, but not my heart. I left the courthouse feeling a huge weight lift from my shoulders. Brenda hugged me, crying, You won, Eleanor. You won. Patrick was smiling broadly. That was a devastating verdict, one of the most decisive I've ever heard. The judge literally destroyed him, but I didn't feel victory. I felt relief. I felt exhaustion. I felt a void that no trial could fill. The following days were strange. News of the trial spread through the neighborhood. Some congratulated me. Others looked at me with pity. Poor woman had to sue her own son, as if I had started this, as if I had wanted to end up in a courtroom. But most people understood. Most knew the truth. And that was enough. Letty disappeared from social media. She deleted all her posts about the case. She closed her accounts. The rumor was that she had left Ethan exactly 1 week after the verdict. A cousin confirmed it, having seen them arguing in a restaurant. Letty was yelling at him. You promised me money. You promised me a comfortable life. And look at you now, you have nothing. No inheritance, no dignity, no future. Ethan was left alone. He lost his job 2 weeks later. The company didn't want employees involved in public scandals. He lost his apartment because he couldn't pay the rent without Letty's salary. The rumor was that he had moved into a small room on the outskirts of town. Alone, in debt, destroyed. Part of me felt pity. He was my son, after all. The other part, the part that Arthur had strengthened before he died, knew this was justice. Painful, but just. He tried to contact me one more time. He sent me a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A handwritten letter on wrinkled paper. I found it in my mailbox one Tuesday afternoon. I recognized the handwriting I had taught him when he was 6 years old. I sat in the kitchen, the letter in my hands, debating whether to open it. Finally, I did. It read, Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I ruined everything. I lost Dad Arthur. I lost you. I lost my marriage, my job, my life, all because of greed and cowardice. You were right about everything. Chloe poisoned me against you, but I let her do it. I chose to believe her instead of you. I chose money over love, and now I have nothing. No money, no love, no family. I just want you to know that I regret it, that I would give anything to turn back time, to have answered your calls, to have gone to see Dad, to have been at his funeral. But I can't, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I'm just asking you to know that I'm sorry, that I always loved you, even though I didn't know how to show it. Your son, Ethan. I read the letter 3 times. Each time the tears fell more heavily. It was real regret. Late, painful, useless, but real. What was I supposed to do with this? Forgive him? Forget him? Destroy the letter and move on? I thought of Arthur, of what he would tell me, and I remembered his last words. Don't give him anything he hasn't earned. I stood up, walked to the stove, and lit a burner. I held the letter over the flame. I watched as the fire licked the paper, as Ethan's words turned to ash. I watched it burn without feeling guilt, without feeling relief, without feeling anything but a cold, necessary closure. Arthur was right. Regret doesn't erase abandonment. Tears don't bring back the dead. Words don't heal wounds that bled for years. I let the letter burn completely. The ashes fell into the sink. I washed them down the drain, and with them went any possibility of reconciliation. Ethan had 10 years to repent, 6 months to visit his father, 27 calls to answer, a funeral to attend, and he chose absence every single time. Now it was too late, far too late. The months passed. Life went on, slow but inevitable. I sold Arthur's shop. There was no point in keeping it. With that money and the inheritance, I could live comfortably. I wasn't rich, but I didn't have to worry. Brenda remained my only real family. We had dinner together twice a week. She went with me to the market. She reminded me to take my pills. A year after the trial, I made a decision. I donated $50,000 to a local nursing home. The same kind of place Ethan had wanted to put me in when Arthur died, but this one was dignified, clean. With kind nurses and decent food, I made the donation in Arthur Miller's name, so that no elderly person is abandoned like he was, I said when I signed the check. The director of the home cried, "This is going to change so many lives, Mrs. Miller." I nodded. I hope so. I hope no older person has to beg for a visit, that none die waiting for a child who never comes. She hugged me. "You're an angel." I shook my head. "I'm not an angel. I'm just a woman who knows what abandonment feels like, and I don't want anyone else to suffer it." Ethan found out about the donation. I don't know how, but he found out. He sent me another message. This one was shorter. "I see you'd rather give my inheritance to strangers." I didn't reply. I blocked the number. His inheritance. He still called it his inheritance, as if he had any right to it, as if money was more important than people. 2 years have passed since the trial. 2 years in which I've rebuilt my life piece by piece. The house no longer smells of sickness and death. It smells of fresh coffee and the flowers Brenda brings me every Sunday. I painted the walls light colors. I changed the old furniture. I donated Arthur's clothes to a shelter. Not because I wanted to forget him, but because I needed to stop living in a museum of pain. I started going out more. I joined a group of older women who met at the church on Tuesdays. We played cards, told stories, laughed at simple things. Some were widows like me. Others had sick husbands. One had also been abandoned by her children. We understood each other without needing long explanations. Shared pain weighs less. I traveled for the first time in my life. Brenda and I went to the beach for a week. We stayed in a modest but clean hotel. We walked on the sand. We ate seafood. We watched the sunset. I cried the first night because Arthur would have loved that place. "Cry all you need," Brenda said, hugging me. "But also live. Arthur would want you to live." She was right. Arthur wouldn't have wanted me to become a ghost, eternally crying. Ethan tried to reach out one more time. It was on the anniversary of Arthur's death. I had gone to the cemetery early, before there were many people. I brought fresh flowers. I cleaned the headstone. I sat on the grass and talked to Arthur, as I always did. "Hello, my love. I miss you every day, but I'm okay. I'm learning to live without you. I hope you're proud." I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and there was Ethan. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. He had deep, dark circles under his eyes. His clothes were too big for him. His hair was a mess. He was a shadow of the successful man he once was. He was holding a cheap bouquet of flowers. We looked at each other in silence for a long moment. "Hi, Mom," he said in a hoarse voice. I didn't answer. I stood up slowly. I brushed the grass off my skirt. "You shouldn't be here," I said flatly. "The restraining order is still in effect." He shook his head. "I came to see Dad Arthur. Not to bother you. I just want to leave him some flowers." I watched him place the flowers next to mine. His hands were shaking. You've left your flowers. Now go." Ethan remained kneeling in front of the grave. "Forgive me, Dad," he whispered. "Forgive me for not being there. For failing you. For being a coward." His voice broke. He started to cry, deep sobs that shook his whole body. Part of me wanted to comfort him. A mother's instinct never fully dies. But the other part, the stronger part, remembered everything. "Tears don't change anything, Ethan," I said in a cold voice. "Arthur died waiting for you. He cried for you. He asked for you until his last breath. Your tears now are useless. They're 2 years too late. They're a lifetime too late." Ethan looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. I know it's too late. I know I ruined everything. But I needed to come. I needed to tell him I'm sorry. And does that make you feel better? Does that ease your guilt?" He shook his head. "No, nothing eases the guilt. I live with it every day. I wake up thinking about all the times I didn't answer your calls. I go to sleep remembering that I didn't go to his funeral. It's a constant torture." I crossed my arms. "Good. Let it be torture. Let it be a lesson. Let every day remind you of what you lost to greed and cowardice." Ethan stood up with difficulty. "Will you ever forgive me?" I looked at him intently. "I don't know. I honestly don't know. Forgiveness is something that's earned, and you haven't done anything to earn it except feel sorry for yourself." He nodded slowly, as if expecting that answer. "I understand. I just want you to know that if I could change everything, I would. But you can't. And that's the tragedy of your choices. They're permanent. Arthur is dead. He's not coming back. Your regret doesn't bring him back. Your guilt doesn't erase your absence. You have to live with that, Ethan. Just like I have to live with the fact that my only son abandoned me when I needed him most." My voice had hardened. There were no more tears, just coldness. Ethan took a step toward me. "Mom." I held up my hand, stopping him. "Don't call me Mom. A mother is someone you call, someone you visit, someone you don't abandon. You didn't treat me like a mother for 10 years. Don't start now that it's convenient for you." He swallowed hard. His eyes filled with tears again. "You were always my mom. You always will be." "No," I said firmly. "Being a mother isn't just biology. It's presence, it's sacrifice, it's constant love. I was your mother for 40 years, but you stopped being my son a long time ago. The day you chose Chloe over us. The day you stopped answering my calls. The day you didn't come to your father's funeral. That day you stopped being my son." The words came out like knives, each one designed to cut, to hurt. To make it clear there was no going back. Ethan crumbled. He sat on the grass, crying like a child. "Don't say that, please, don't say that." But I felt no compassion. I had spent all my compassion taking care of Arthur, mourning his death, surviving the abandonment. I had nothing left for Ethan. "Go. I don't want to see you again. Don't come back to the cemetery when I'm here. Don't try to contact me. You don't exist for me. You are a name I have forgotten how to say." I turned around and walked toward the cemetery exit without looking back. I heard his sobs fade behind me. I heard him call my name once. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I kept walking until I reached the street where Brenda was waiting for me in the car. "Are you okay?" she asked, seeing my face. "I'm okay," I answered. And it was true. For the first time in years, I was okay. That night, I slept deeply. No nightmares, no guilt, no pain. I dreamed of Arthur. He was young, healthy, smiling. He took my hand and said, "You did well, my love. I'm proud of you. You were strong. You were brave. Now live. Live for both of us." I woke up crying, but they were tears of peace, of closure, of liberation. The following years were calmer. I moved to a smaller apartment near Brenda. The big house had too many memories. I needed a fresh start. I donated more money to the nursing home. I started volunteering there twice a week. I read books to the elderly. I listened to their stories. I gave them the company that Ethan never gave me. I met a man. His name was Walter. He was a widower too, 10 years older than me. We became friends over coffee after volunteering. It wasn't romance, it was companionship. It was someone who understood loneliness, someone who didn't judge my past, someone who was simply there, and sometimes that's enough. Ethan disappeared from my life completely. He stopped trying to contact me. I stopped hearing rumors about him. It was as if he had never existed. And strangely, that didn't hurt. I had cried so much for the son I lost that I had no tears left. I had accepted that some relationships are so broken they can't be repaired, and I was at peace with that. Today I am 73 years old. My hair is completely white, my hands have age spots, my back hurts in the mornings, but I am alive. I am surrounded by people who genuinely love me. Brenda, Walter, the women from the church group, the elderly at the nursing home. They are my family now. The family I chose. The family that chose me. Sometimes I think about Ethan. I wonder how he is, if he's found peace, if he's learned anything. But they are fleeting thoughts. They don't keep me up at night. They don't steal my joy. Because I learned something fundamental over these years. Family isn't blood. Family is who is there when the world falls apart, who holds your hand in the hospital, who cries with you at funerals, who celebrates your small victories. Ethan was my blood. But he stopped being my family the day he chose abandonment, and I chose to keep living. I chose self-forgiveness over forgiving him. I chose peace over a forced reconciliation. I chose to honor Arthur's memory by living fully instead of withering in resentment. And if one day, somewhere, Ethan truly understands what he lost, I hope that understanding makes him a better person. Not for me. I don't need him anymore, but for himself. Because living with guilt without redemption is a hell I wouldn't wish on anyone. Not even him. But that is his burden, his path, his lesson. I've already learned mine. I learned that true love is shown in the little things, in answered calls, in frequent visits, in being present. And I learned that when someone abandons you, you have the power to decide whether you keep waiting for them or whether you move on. I chose to move on, and it was the best decision of my life. I was 61 years old when my son Ethan abandoned me. It wasn't a gradual goodbye, not a farewell with fake hugs and empty promises. It was a door slammed in my face, and a sentence that still burns my throat every time I remember it. You're not my problem anymore, Mom. 10 years. 10 years of absolute silence. 10 years in which my phone never rang with his voice. 10 years in which every birthday, every Christmas, every sleepless morning, I waited for a knock on my door. But Ethan never came back, until my husband,